As the country's energy crisis worsens, many consumers are opting for solar power. According to Just Money, owners of stand-alone homes have leeway when installing solar power systems, but there are rules to consider if you live in a residential estate or a complex. The organizations say homeowners associations and sectional title body corporates may regulate these installations. So let's talk a little bit more about that. And joining us online is Just Money Operations Manager, Sarah Nicholson. Sarah, it's great to have you. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you.
A very important conversation, because that is, wherever you are, this is what everybody's talking about, is that what do you have? Have you got an inverter? Do you have solar? Do you have a battery backup? Have you got a generator? What are we doing? This is how we're living at the moment. So I spoke about an estimate cost for last year, how much was installed. And I suppose I'm putting you on the spot. That may not be your field of expertise, but a number of something like 1.2 billion rand is doing the rounds. I can imagine it's even more.
I'm pretty sure it is one. I'm just looking at some of the stats that the banking group Capitec estimated, and they said the startup costs alone just to get solar panels installed and going off grid can range anything from 150,000 to 350,000. And that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
The banks obviously have noted that we don't have to go completely all in or completely all off grid. But those are some of the numbers that are going around in order to install solar systems in our homes.
It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, you've got there's one person that's really smiling, and that's the man that owns the solar business. They are coining it at the moment. They really are, but they can't actually keep up with demand, and that's the reality.
Correct. There's quite a few people that I know that have ordered and have gone through the process of trying to get it, and you have to wait a while because there is so much going around.
Yeah.
And it also raises the topic of making sure that you are going through reputable suppliers and providers. There's obviously a huge opportunity for fly-by-night companies to come through and make promises that they can deliver. But it's really important that if this is something that you're looking to do, then you find someone that's reputable and that you can trust, even if it is going to take a little bit longer to get to you.
And this is now where we jump into this conversation, because this is very, very important. I've heard many people being caught out by it and, going with a service provider that isn't necessarily above board or isn't somebody that is regulated or anything, whatever you're looking for. And sometimes the deal, as usual, it looks so good, but it's too good to be true, and then things start going wrong. So when you say a reputable installer, how do we find out? What are the things that we should look for before appointing that service provider?
Definitely doing your research. One of the things that we love as South Africans is reviews. So finding out if they've done someone that reading the reviews on the sites, checking different things. So you just need to make sure that, and I think the key point is if it's too good to be true, it is likely that's the case. So just make sure that you've done your research and you really can trust these people that you're going to be spending so much money with.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this is a lot of money you're spending, and a lot of people are talking about, one of the important things as well is to insure this, because you sort of install it, but then you've got to realize that you should insure something like this as well.
Correct. I mean, you've got to make sure you know what your requirements are. You want to, like we said, do your research, choose a really well-established company that's been around for at least 3 years. You want to shop around. You want to agree on an installation schedule. So, don't pay things up front and then wait weeks and weeks. So have some agreements there, get a warranty. And then, like you said, choose the right insurance. Make sure that you're insuring these things. They are expensive, and you want to make sure that you've done it. So in a sectional title scheme, the unit is indicated on a sectional title plan, for example. It's important that insurance is in a sectional title complex is added to the complex insurance as part of the common property. So it just depends if you are living in a complex or if you're a homeowner. You just need to do your research there to understand what the different insurance requirements are. If you're a homeowner, standalone home, you will obviously need to go around doing that yourself and deal with your insurers. But if you are in a complex, you need to understand what the Homeowners Association rules and guidelines are around that, and how you're going to install it.
So these are also important issues to discuss, because if you're a standalone home, you can pretty much so make your own decision with regard to installing these solar panels on your roofs. But if you're in an estate or a complex, you've got to abide by certain rules and regulations. I mean, I've even heard some complexes say they don't like the solar panels on the roof because they look unsightly. I mean, I don't know how you bring in a rule like that in the current circumstances that we're living in, but perhaps you can give us an understanding of complexes and estates and all of that when it comes to installing these.
Correct. Look, we're in a state of emergency with our power. It's having a huge impact on us, South Africans. It's costing a lot of money individually. There's jobs that are being lost. So in terms of body corporate saying it's unsightly, you really can go and have a chat with them. And I think we really speak about some of the rules. So how it works is in body corporates, they're managed under the Sectional Title Scheme Management Act. And it's very specific about the way in which common property must be managed and how approval must be given for installations or items on those common properties. So when installed on a common property, solar panels are typically placed on the roof, which is what people might be a little bit upset about, or even the carports. And then every solar request requires a special general meeting with at least 33% of owners or their proxies present, and at least 75% of those in attendance must vote in favour of the resolution. Contact rules can be amended, but the Community Schemes Ombud Services must approve these new rules. So if you are fighting to get that changed, and there is some issues, you would have to go through that Ombud service.
And I imagine the argument is quite strong, as you say. I mean, this is a state of emergency we're living in. One of the cost-effective and interesting ways, and we're seeing this happening in different environments, like complexes and estates, is that the actual homeowners come together and they try and find a solution that can help everybody in that complex. Talk to us about this and how there's a possibility of making that work.
Absolutely. Again, it is around the rules. And so if there's enough people that do agree, and there are concerns within, let's say, the body, Homeowners Body Association doesn't agree, then it's a case of going and getting those rules amended. But you would need to go through the Community Schemes Ombud Services, and they would need to approve those new rules. So it is possible. And if you've got the majority vote, then you have a good chance of being able to change that.
Yeah, but also just making sure that the different homeowners pay their portion towards it, because then you're in trouble.
Correct.
Then you've got to make sure this is all written down and very, very important. But there's also issues of energy conservation that complexes can consider. What are those? What are we talking about here?
Sure, there's so many options, and there's things like, if we have a look at really making sure that we've got smart meters installed so that the owners understand how much they're actually spending or how much electricity that they're using. Renting solar panels for common areas is another option rather than purchasing them outright, which can also help reduce those upfront costs, as well as the risk associated with owning and maintaining the panels. Sharing systems, as you mentioned, or the costs with neighbouring properties or developments, that can also dilute the costs. Installing batteries to help store excess energy generated by the solar panels and making it available for use during periods of high energy demand, or even when the panels are not generating electricity. And then, also encouraging residents to do simple things like upgrading your appliances to be more energy efficient. And that could definitely help make sure they're Energy Star rated appliances, and this could help reduce the complex overall energy consumption.
Yeah. So let's sort of give perhaps an option for those that, I mean, when we opened the interview, we were speaking about costs from 100,000 to 300,000 rand. Now, the majority of South Africans cannot afford that, and this is the reality. What are some of the solutions that perhaps are out there that are cheaper, that you can actually sort of say, well, you know what, this is a nice option for you to go with under those circumstances, and just to get a little bit of power to keep going, to keep the lights on?
Look, having a load shedding backup. This is typically an inverter or a battery backup charged by the grid when the power is available, and this doesn't require solar panels. If it's a homeowner and we've got 2 or 4 hours, getting something as simple as a UPS is tremendously helpful, much more cost effective. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to have the kettle boiling, but those are things that can at least keep the internet going if you're working from home, or getting gas and having something to cook food. I know as a mom, that's often a struggle when the power goes out. How do you cook and how do you fit those times in? Some of the other options are, we can jump into it, a grid-tied solar. So that's a grid-tied inverter with solar panels. You're still connected to the grid while you're allowing yourself to supplement your energy needs when the sun is shining. Another one is a hybrid system, which is a grid-tied inverter with solar panels and battery storage. And the batteries are charged by solar and the grid, depending on what power sources are available. And then the much more expensive is your off-grid system, which is a solar system with battery storage. Energy, which is then generated from your solar system, is stored in large battery banks, and you can operate independently from load shedding.
Yeah.
So there are options out there. And, potentially looking at rent, there are renting solutions out there as well. So it takes a little bit of research, but there are options out there to make this a little bit easier for all of us and businesses as well.
Absolutely. That's the reality. Thank you. Thank you so very, very much for joining us. Just Money Operations Manager Sarah Nicholson talking to us about solar power, moving off the grid, the costs associated, and I suppose the rules as well when it comes to complexes and different places where you live.